Hello everyone, welcome to another lecture for Sage 50 2021 edition. So in this lecture what we're going to do is we're going to start a new module which is focused on the payroll, and in your textbook it is chapter 7. So what I'm going to do in this video is we'll briefly talk about chapter 7 as what's covered in this chapter, and this chapter is divided into two parts. The first part of that chapter is focused on the payroll setup, as how do you set up the payroll module in Sage 50. And then the second part of the chapter focus on processing the payroll. So once your payroll is set up, you're not going to be setting up those things every time. The only thing that you will be setting up is if you have a new employee, you will create a new employee profile. That is the only thing that you will set up on the ongoing basis. And then the other stuff that you focus on processing which is processing your actual payroll. And those, depending on the company, if the company is using monthly, bi-weekly, or a semi-monthly payroll cycle, then based on that, you will running the payroll on a periodic basis. Okay, so we are going to go through the process of how do you run the payroll, what are the things that you'll be encounter while you're processing the payroll, and then what happens if something goes wrong with the payroll, how do you avoid the payroll run, and then or a payroll check, and then rerun the payroll. And then the last and most important thing is how do you calculate or remit the payroll taxes. So everything is done by the system, but it is your responsibility to make sure that the remittance of the payroll taxes are paid and reported to CRA on an accurate basis. So we're gonna go through that as well and see how that works and how do we show that in Sage 50. So these are things that will be covered in chapter 7. So the way that I'm going to record this video is, first part we'll talk about the chapter in general, so which is focused on this particular screen that I'm in. And the second, what I'm going to do is in this video I'll focus on the payroll setup, which is exercise 7.1 up to 7.7. So we'll set up the payroll, get everything ready to roll, and then we'll stop this video, and there'll be a second part of the video which will focus on the transaction, which is exercise 7.8 all the way to 7.20. So that'll be the second recording. That'll be part 2 of the payroll module. Okay, so let's get started with chapter 7. So in this company, you are given 2 payroll files. So similar to what we have been doing in chapter 2A, 2B, 3A, 3B, or chapter 8, you are given a company file. So in the similar way, you are given a company file, and the company name that you're working is Creative Wallpaper. So there are 2 database files we have. We have 07 wallpaper file, which is actually a file where you start everything from exercise 7.1 and work it all the way to the end of the exercise. So if you're done chapter 7 and you want to redo it again, but you don't want to do a setup, you can either create a backup at the end of 7.7 and use that to do all the exercise 7.8 onwards, or you can do the exercise, take the database file, which is a company file, wallpaper 2, and that will have everything complete from exercise 7.1 to 7.7. Then you start from 7.8. Okay, so if you are one of the students who are starting the stuff from starting the exercise from 7.8, then you will be using the wallpaper number 2 file to work on chapter 7. Okay, but it is important that you are familiar yourself with this setup, because that's actually a very important part, and it does help you to understand the payroll processing as well. So what kind of exercise do we have? So we'll start with the database file, so which I assume that everybody's going to start with wallpaper file 07, and then we'll activate the payroll module. If we have any previous year entries, we reverse them. Okay, so if I accrue anything from last month, I have to reverse that payroll entry because that's the process that we use. And then we set up the payroll module. So we are going to go into the setup of the company and then make the changes, link the module, link the accounts with the payroll, including the income, the deductions, the payroll taxes. All those things will be linked in the payroll. using setup. Once the setup is done, we are going to go into enter the employee information. And the employee information, now if you are doing this transition during the year, you may be required to, not maybe, it is required for you to pull up the year to date information and have that in your payroll system before you start the first payroll. Okay, because when you get a pay stub from your employer, it has the year to date information. So if you're transitioning the system in the mid-year or during the year, then you have to take what is your year to date on the pay stub from the last time you run the payroll, and then enter that when you're setting up the payroll module. Okay, once that is done, obviously system will cross check that those numbers matching with the accounts that you linked with in a link up, and then you will end up getting into a payroll module and say ready to move. You go into the history tab and tell the system that it is ready to use the payroll. When you check mark, it will cross check your numbers, everything looks okay, then the history tab will remove, and then you're ready to start recording transactions. So in 7.8, you are creating a new employee, which is going to be a new employee that you hired, which will have no year-to-date information. So it's just the information that you're entering for a new hire. Issuing a paycheck, so we are going to go through and run the payroll, first payroll run on the system. And now you guys will see that there are two ways you can run the payroll. You can either run a payroll check run or you can do a paycheck. So if you have more than one employee that you want to pay, you will do a payroll check run. If you want to just pay one single employee, you can just go into and say create a paycheck. That will only give you an option to select one employee. Whereas in Excel 7.9, when you're running a payroll check run, it will let you select multiple employees depending on the payroll cycle. So we'll go through, when we actually do that, we'll go through the payroll entries as well. And then in this company, we have two kinds of employees. We have employees working on hourly basis and salary employee. Salary employees are getting paid on a semi-monthly basis. So their payroll run will be different than the employees who are actually getting paid on hourly, because hourly employees are, I think, bi-weekly. And then we'll see how the withholding taxes work. I'll go through those exercises. And then after we have done few payroll runs in these exercises, the system is going to ask you to run a payroll. They simply give you the hours, and based on those hours, you will actually run the payroll by yourself. And we'll also go through a process of how do you run a payroll for a vacation pay. So if an employee going on a vacation, how do you process the vacation pay? Then we're also going to go through an exercise where the employee was paid a wrong hours. How do you rectify that error? So if you have an employee who was paid 80 hours versus 75 hours, what are you going to do? You reverse the payroll run that you issued, and then issue a new check with the revised hours. So that's the process. We'll go through that in the system. Payroll for a pay period ending. So then we'll have a last payroll. That's also something that the system will tell you. I mean, the exercise tell you how many hours or who is getting paid. Then you will just run that by yourself. Then in exercise 7.8, we are going to go through remitting payroll taxes. So it is a process. So we're going to understand how the payroll process works. And then the system will produce a report, and then you take that and then you record the payroll taxes payable entry. And then we'll go on exercise 7.19, where if your company is doing a month end, somebody will tell you how many hours has been worked since the last payroll run was done. And then what you will do is you will look at the total wages for that period and do an accrual entry for that particular month. So these are the things that most likely are important for your analysis. At the end of the chapter is going to show you about the T4s, how the T4s works, what kind of reports that are there. We are not going to be actually processing any T4s, because for the processing of T4s, you do need to have the proper address, SIN number, and also the person who is actually issuing their SIN number has to be entered as well to run T4s as an approver. So that information is not available, so we cannot process. But I'll show you guys where to look for as well when you process the T4s. And then at the end, you want to make sure you know how to print these particular reports in from this module, because that's something that you will be asked to do at the end of this chapter, and then also in your exam as well, and also in the assignment that you will be doing in 1 or 2 weeks, in 2 weeks actually. No, 2 weeks actually, next week, because that once we finish the payroll module, we're gonna have a second assignment that's gonna be due. Okay, so that is the brief of this chapter, and then obviously I will give you one of the challenge exercise as a homework as well. But I think the first focus is getting the chapter done, because this is a long chapter and I want all of you guys to attempt this chapter on your own. Okay, so that being said, we're gonna start chapter 7, and in this video we are only going to focus on setup, and the next video will focus on the transaction. So for me to do this exercise 7.1 to 7.7, I need wallpaper.exe file, so I'm going to download this. Okay, so the file has been downloaded. Now I'm going to open Sage 50. Okay, so now select an existing company. And now we're going to find chapter 7 wallpaper file, and then here we select the company file. And I'm going to move the chapter on the other screen, so that way I can go through the exercises as we go through the screen as well. So when you open the file, obviously the first thing that's going to ask you is the session date. Okay, I'm still waiting for the Sage to show up. Okay, so it's asking me the session date, which is January 1st, 2025. So we'll select that and press OK. Alright, so now we have finally Sage 50 open on our computer. So I'm gonna move that one on this side. So here we have Sage 50. Now if you see on the left hand side, we don't have the payroll module. So before I get into the payroll module, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys the trial balance of this company. So I'm going to show you guys in that trial balance as which account are we going to be using to link up the payroll module. So here is our trial balance that we have on January 1st, 2025. Obviously, we are going to use a bank account. So if you have a specific bank account that are used to process the payroll, you can select that particular account. In this company, we only have one bank account, so we link this bank account. We have this loan receivable. So this is the money if you are giving advance to your employees and it has to be paid back. And then we have to have an account where we keep track of that. That is this account. Then we have these payroll liability accounts like vacation payable, EI payable, CPP payable, income tax payable. These are the taxes payable to CRA. Vacation payable shows how much we owe to the employees as a vacation. And then we have these United wage donation, union dues, pension dues, medical dues, safety shoes dues. So these are the accounts that we use to process what is owed to the companies that we need to, because with withholding these from employees pay, and we have to pay it to the companies that we are enrolling with. So we have to show them that this is paid out. You may see a debit balance here because this is receivable. This is something that was deducted from the employee's pay and need to be reimbursed back to the company. Then we have WSIB payable. That's money that's payable to the WSIB organization. And then on the expense side, we have wages and salary and commission. These are the expense account. Then we also have a separate account for the overtime. Then we have EI, CPP, and WSIB expenses. These are the taxes, the employer taxes that the company pay from their own pocket, not from the employees withhold. These are the additional taxes they pay, and that becomes expense for the company, and we use these accounts when we do a link up of the payroll. So now we know which GL account we're going to use. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to activate the payroll module. Okay, let's go back to the first entry, making the employee payroll module visible. So let's activate the payroll account first. So here we're going to go into a setup. I'm sure you guys know where to go. Go into the views and click and activate the employee and payroll module and press OK. As soon as you click on it, it's going to activate your employee and payroll module. The next exercise is going to ask you to reverse the payroll entry that was accrued last month. Now you see that history tabs opens up. That means you to enter the employee's historical information before you start processing the payroll. So now what we're going to do is we're going to reverse. So I'm going to go back into my trial balance one more time and look at what my accrual entry was. In this chapter, they've told us that they're accrued for $192 of commission and $320 of wages expenses that was accrued last month. Okay, so if you see that on your accrued payroll payable is $512, and they told you that $512 is made up of two things. $320 is the wages and $192 is the commission. So therefore we need to reverse that. To reverse that, we have to go into the company module and do an entry, which is going to be a manual entry. And if you have the if you can save the if this file has a recurring entry that was saved, because if this is something that you're doing every month, you rather save them as a recurring entry. Or there is, see, setup of a wages accrual and the reversing of the prior period, because this is what I will do. If I'm an accountant, I know there's an entry that I do every month, I'll save them as a recurring entry and I'll just recall. Now my entry and description is already there. All I have to do is just date is there as well. And if I look at the amount agrees with what I accrued. So it is already there. So I know that it's going to be debit to the wages payable, which is the accrued payroll payable, and credit to the wages expense. I'm reversing what was done on December 31st. And then this is done on 2nd of January actually, so I'll have to change the session date. I'll have to change actually the session date as well. So I need to disregard this transaction and first change the session date to January 2nd. system doesn't allow me to do a future transaction. So I recall my reversing entry, and now I can change my date to second, and I don't need to change anything because everything is exactly what I want. And I click process, I click post, and this entry has been posted. Now in the next part we are going to focus on the setup. So again, I'm not going to do a detailed setup. The detailed setup has to be done by you guys when you are going to follow exercise 7.3 by yourself. So what I'm going to show is I'm going to show you the settings as what are the things that need to be looked after. So here is, you come under the settings. Obviously you will change the company name and put your name right here. That's pretty standard for every file you're working on. Then you come into the payroll. This is where you are doing the setup. Now what's going to happen here is that you have a different tabs, and all those tabs has to be set up. Okay, now how do you set all these tabs up? Is you're going to go in and link these particular tabs to the GL accounts and check mark the things that are important. First comes incomes. So now think about it. If employee is working, the employees may have been getting different kinds of income. They may be getting salary, wages, commission, bonus, or anything else that may be applicable for the company. Okay, so in our case we have regular, which is the hourly wages. So now it's important for you to understand what all of these things mean. So this is the title. So if you are paying somebody, this is what it will show on their pay stub. Now the type is for you to say, okay, regular, how does a regular being calculated? It's hourly. So that means you can double click on it. It will show you the option as if this is hourly, a differential rate. So in this case, we said this is hourly. The differential is if you're paying somebody per piece or something like that, that will be differential rate. And here, once you put that hourly, you have to mention the unit, which is by default shows up as hour if you select hourly. Now these check marks plays a very important role because this tells you if that income is taxable. Okay, that means the system will calculate taxes on this. If by chance you uncheck this, it's going to create problem because it will not calculate taxes on this income. So you want to make sure these are selected. This represents federal and provincial taxes. If you are Quebec, you have to mention this because this is mostly applicable if your employee works in Quebec. EI, definitely calculate on this. Insurable earnings, because EI, anytime your employee pays EI, it goes in insurable earning. Calculate CPP, you want to pay taxes, CPP on that as well. Calculate EST, so that's employer health tax. So you will put a check mark on this because all of these incomes are taxable. VRSP, I think this is special RSP that's only applicable for certain provinces. We don't have this one in Ontario, so even if you check or uncheck, it doesn't matter. This one represents Quebec CPP, Quebec HSF, which is health plan as well. You do leave it as check mark, but because we don't have an employee in Quebec, so it will not be applicable. And the same thing happens for all these incomes, right? Now you see that on loan, we don't have anything here because when you advance an employee a loan, the loan is not a taxable income because the employee has to pay that back. So that's why we uncheck all these taxes because the employee don't pay tax on the loan. Advances are similar to as getting a regular wages, so they are taxable. The benefit, it is taxable only for income tax purposes, but we don't deduct CPP, EI, or any of the other stuff on the benefits. Vacation paid also get taxed the same way as the other income. So now you see that these are empty tabs. If you were to create a new earning, you can put a name there, and then based on the type, you can double click, select the type, and then select pay, whether it's hourly or pay. You see that this is salary and we select it as an income, and then as soon as we selected income, here we have the option as period because a fixed amount that gets paid. Then come to the deduction, and here you can name a deduction that need to be deducted from employee, and then if it's by amount, you put that amount. If it's a percentage of an income, you can put as a percentage, and then you have to mention that percentage when you set up an employee. When if it's tax deductible, then we uncheck these things, but if it's not, we'll leave everything as default. Now these are the taxes that's applicable. So if you have an EI, the employer pays 1/4 of the EI premium, so we'll leave as 1.4. And then we come right to the next one. So I'm just gonna go back to see what else. So what is that WSIB rate? Is 0.41. So this one, depending on your company, because the WSIB is different for everybody. This company is EST exempt. The employer health taxes are only paid if they reach a certain threshold. I think it was $490,000 last year. I think this may have been changed. I think it's going back to 500 something. So that changes every year. So we assume that this company is lower than amount. So we have 0 EST. If you have certain other expenses such as uniform or any kind of deductions you have to do, you can put them and name it here. So if you want to have employees entitled for a sick days, you can have the system calculate those. I don't like this one here because it doesn't provide the accurate information, so I will skip this part. Now the remittance part is important because this is where you mention what kind of taxes you withhold and who do you need to pay. So we're going to come back to it after we set up everything. Then you have job categories. If you have different titles, you can create those titles and assign it to employees. We have a Manulife which can integrate with the system. So if you have Manulife as a vendor, then you want to set up, it will automatically calculate and link that to the particular portal. I haven't seen anybody using this feature, but I'm sure if a company has a complex system, they may want to use this feature as well. Now this is an important piece. Okay, so you know how whenever you're going into the income and deductions, it was only giving the name, but here where it comes out, because over there you can't change the name, so here you can put the names to those income, and see income 1 is salary, income 2 is commission, income 3 we don't have any name typed. So if I put anything here, it will show up in your income number 3 as what that means. Okay, and the same thing with the deductions, you put a name to these deductions, that will show up in your deduction. Okay, so in this company, I remember there are 4 additional deductions we have, so we'll name them here. The first one we have is pension, we'll put pension here. And then deduction 2 we have union dues, and then deduction 3 we have medical, deduction 4 we have safety shoes, right? And so far, like if you have more, you can just keep adding them. Okay, and when we save it, it will show up in your deduction. You see that it will show up in your deductions. Okay, so now when it shows up in your deduction, you have to mention if this is amount or a percentage. So I know the commission is based on a percentage. Okay, so what you will do is you put the commission and then you will change that to do it by a percentage. So I'll select it and call this percentage of gross. And then because the pension, when you pay the pension, it is tax deductible. So in that case, you may end up saving the taxes on it, because if you may see that is if you're deducting CPP, you're contributing towards your pension, they may deduct less taxes because they will consider that this pension is tax deferral, so you have a tax saving on a year end, so they may not withhold taxes on your pension amount. So you will check this, uncheck this, and it will know that this is deducted for tax purposes. So it will give you a tax break on the pension that you contributed. Then we have union dues, and for the union dues, you can also remove because union dues are tax deductible as well, whereas the medical and the safety issues, they are not, so we'll leave them as checked. Okay, so taxes, we don't change anything. And the next part we have is we already talked about the other expenses, and we are gonna come back to the remittance after we set up or link up the accounts. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a link up. So first we're going to do the link up of the income. So here we have to mention as which bank account are we going to pay the payroll, and then here we select the vacation owed as where this money is going to go, and the loan, if you advance the money to an employee, where does that go? Vacation earned, when you pay an employee, where if you have a separate account for vacation, you can book as a vacation expenses, but in this company we book everything to wages. And if you have a specific account for the overtime, some companies like to keep track of the overtime in a separate account, so we show up here. We have a separate account for the salary expense, we have separate account for commission, and then I forgot to change the name of the income tree. We're gonna change that after I do this. So this is a reimbursement. This account is 5395 account. That account is not created. Okay, I didn't know that we need to create, so I'm just going to create that account, and it's 5395 and call this reimbursement payroll expense. Next, and okay, so that account is already there, so maybe I was not typing it correctly. 5395, let's see, it is there, so we know creating that, it's already there actually. Okay, so that part is done. Then we go into the deductions. So now here we have to link the deduction saying pension. Where does that pension go? The pension goes into account 2430, pension payable account, and then the union dues go into 2420 account, 2420, and the medical dues goes into 2440, and the safety shoes goes into 2450. Okay, you see these are going into the payable because I take the money from the employees and I have to pay it to the vendors. Then comes to the taxes. Now taxes is important because you see that you see two different places to link these. One is the payable because anytime you deduct EI, CPP on income tax, you have to pay it to the government. So you identify the accounts. So this is EI payable, CPP payable, income tax payable, and WSIB payable. Now these are the expenses that's used when we pay the employer portion. So this is EI expense, CPP expense, and then the WSIB expense. Now if you have an adjustment that can go in here, in our case we don't have any adjustment, so now that we're going to link them. But if you are if you have a huge amount of payroll, so you may want to have the adjustment account as well. And if you identify any other expenses, you have to link them as well. But in our case, we did not, so we don't have to worry about that part. So now I have to complete the remittance, but the remittance part I cannot complete until I press OK, because if I click OK, it's going to recognize all these liability accounts, and then it's going to ask you to link those to the remittances. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press OK here. Once I press OK, it will save everything that I entered. Then I'm gonna go back to the settings again and go back to the payroll. Now I'm going to go into the remittance section. Now you see that every place I select the payables, the remittances, it's gonna ask you who you're gonna remit and what is the frequency of that remittance. So this one I'm gonna remit to the receiver journal, which is CRA, and the frequency is monthly. So I have all these different frequency. So the way the payroll works is that you withhold the employees' taxes and pay to CRA on 15th of the following month. Then it's going to ask you what was the last remittance you did. So we're going to use January 1st as a date. That was, and the next one will be due 1 month off after this, which will be February. Then this is also all these ones, CPP, EI, and income taxes, they are going to go to the receiver journal. You see that because I selected this vendor, it will remember that this is the remittance frequency, and it will say that if you're doing that, you have to do this for the other two, the same thing as well. Now this one I'm paying to workplace, and that's also done on a monthly basis as well, and we select the same date for all the vendors. This one going to the pension agency, which is this one right here, and again monthly, and the date is January 1st. This is union dues, and again monthly, and the date is 1st. And then we have medical going into the medical group, and this is monthly as well, and January 1st. And the safety shoes goes into the Ontario safety shoes, that's also monthly, and this is January 1st. So you end up adding and save all these frequencies, so system will remember how the remitters are going to be done. So once that part is done, you press OK, and then you move into the next step, which is the exercise 7.6, where you start entering the employee information. So now if you go into the employee and payroll module, you see there's no employees that are here. So what are we going to do in this step is we're going to enter the employee information. Okay, so there are, let me just go back to the main screen where you have the summary of all the employees, and I'm going to pick one employee and show you how that works, and then obviously you will be doing that for all the employees that we have. So we have 1, 2, 3, I think 4 employees. Okay, and you have to set up all these employee information. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up one employee. So I'm going to pick Gurjeet Singh, the employee, and then we'll enter that employee information, so that will give you an understanding of how this employee setup works. Then I'm going to have you complete the setup of the employees by yourself and make sure you do it right. So here you can go view employees. There's no point of viewing the employees because we don't have any employees. You can modify the employees. If I click on modify, it's going to ask you which employee, then you select that employee and then you change the information. You cannot remove an employee that has that information. You can make the employee inactive if you want to, but that's usually not a good practice. You always inactivate the employee and leave it in the system. So here we click add employee, and then you have to go through these tabs. Okay, so here you first thing that you do is you put the employee name. So we're gonna say we put the last name first. I mean, you put last name, comma, then first name, and then you put the address. So I'm gonna skip the address 123 any street, and then we'll put the London, Ontario, and I'm gonna skip all that information and go jump into the SIN number directly. So I have given a SIN number which may be valid or not valid, because these system they actually recognize, and there's a formula there to see if this SIN number is a valid SIN number or not. So if it gives you an error message, then you can ignore it for our purposes, but if you're using the system in a company, then you don't want to ignore, because there's a penalty for CRA for not reporting the correct SIN number for the employee. So you want to make sure it's done correctly. So here you put the hiring date. So in this case the hiring date is August 18, 97, August 18. So let's go into August 18 and I'll just enter the year manually, 1997. And gender, if you want, you can put in, so it says female, and we'll put the hire date is, so that was actually the date of birth, April 2nd. So actually this is, not the birth date, this is the hire date. The birth date that's given is August 18. So that's hire date, and the birth date that's given is April 2nd, 1972. So April 2nd and 1972. Now these two things are very important because it does gets reported to CRA. Full-time terminate. This is only if you're terminating employee, then you have to enter the termination date and also mention what are the reason for hiring or terminating the employee. Then go to the taxes. Now this is important because this is where you mention which province this employee work, which is going to be Ontario in our case, because the taxes for the employee is based on the tax table for Ontario. Every province has different tax rate, so it is important you have the right province selected. Then you enter the tax deduction. So this is morely applicable when you hire an employee. You get them to fill up the TD1 form for federal and provincial, and then based on the amount, the deductions that you have, you enter the threshold. So in the federal is 13,808 and the provincial is 10,880. Then if there is any additional index you select, if you have specific credits, you will enter those ones manually. Okay, most likely employees put 0 here, but if there's a certain employee, they have a certain credits, they will enter so that the taxes are calculated correctly. If employee wants to deduct additional taxes, you can enter that amount and system will recognize that amount anytime in the future. Then come to the income. Now this is where you mention how frequently do you pay employees. Okay, so it has 1 all the way to 53. So 1 represents if you're paying an employee on annual basis, 2 represents semi-annually, but most practice is you either pay an employee on monthly, that's very rare as well. You pay an employee on semi-monthly, which is twice a month, then 26, which is bi-weekly. So in this case, this employee is getting paid bi-weekly, so we select 26. Okay, so that's, now this employee is paid salary and the frequency is semi-monthly, so that's 24. Okay, so that means this is 24 payroll frequency. Then you enter the amount. So now this employee is not getting paid the regular pay, they are not hourly, this is on salary, and we have to mention the amount of salary, which is 2,500 per pay period, and for the hours we put 80, so it will remember, and we can remove the commission because this employee is not getting commission. And vacation rate, so if we are paying or accruing the vacation, we put a rate 4%, but as for salary employee we don't do that because we don't retain the vacation. The employee will take the 2 weeks by yourself, so you don't need to accrue or pay the vacation. It will have the retain tab, it will remember to retain, but in our case we don't even want to retain because the salary employee, it will automatically remembers 2 weeks and will calculate by itself. Okay, so then what we do is on the next one we go in the next tab, which is deduction. So here you have to mention how much deductions you have to deduct. So we have 4% vacation pension that we're deducting, so we'll put 4. because this is represent the percentage on a per pay period. This represent the amount per pay. So this employee have no union dues, so with 0 here. Medical is $24, and this employee don't need to pay for safety shoes, so that represent 0 right here. Then you go into the WSIB. Because we enter 0.41, it will remember it's 4.41. It will automatically shows up here. Now some companies, they may have different rates for depending on different titles of the job. So if that is the case, then you enter the particular rate that's applicable for that student, for that employee. We don't do the entitlement, so we'll skip that part. Now the last part is the T4. We don't change anything. This is something that tells you the information for the entire year, and it will remember that information for your T4 submission. Okay, so that will right now is 0. So if we have any historical information, we enter that information here as well. So in this case, for this employee, there is no information that need to be entered. Okay, so if you have historical information, you will enter them right here. So this one is not applicable for us, so we'll skip that. And then also for this one, that's something that I wanted you to highlight as well. So if you go into the income, and if there's historical information, you will enter them here. So in this case, there was no historical information for this employee, so we leave it blank. For the employee, which is Jordan, has a vacation accrual of $480. So in that case, if there is a vacation accrual, which is right here, you will enter $480 right here. Okay, so that's something you have to remember if you are setting up the employee, which is Jordan Curry. So that's done for this employee, and I click save and close. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to end up adding all the employees that you have there. Once you finish adding all the employees, you're going to enter the history and say that you're done. Once you click on this, you will not get a message like that. For me, I'm getting a message because I'm off, my balance doesn't agree with my vacation pay is off, and I have a loan payable to the employees, but I don't have $90 because I have not set up those employees that have a vacation pay as well as the loan advance, which was I think the first employee that we were adding. So those has to be entered, and you have to have those ones done. And then if you set that up properly, you won't get that message. It will just clear up the history tab, and then you're ready to start recording transactions. Okay, so I'm gonna have you guys setting up all the employees, and if it gives you a message, there's only 2 places it's gonna give you a message, because we don't have the year-to-date information for the wages or any of the taxes. The only thing that we have to set up is if your employee has an accrued vacation, you set that up. And if your employee has the loan that they received in advance, you have to set that up. And remember, loans are going to be entered as a negative. So again, the book will tell you as how to enter as well. So that's something that I'm telling you, because that is the money that need to be paid back to the company. So it will show as a $90 of loan advance. So actually it's not set up as minus. So I'm just looking at the setup of that employee that we have right here. This particular employee, Doran. So the loan payable shows up as 90. So it's just going to be entered as a regular full amount because system knows it's a loan. So it will be positive. I think it's a repayment that has to be entered as a negative. Okay. So my apologies here. So it has to be entered as a positive. So these 2 things were missing, because if you enter that, it won't give you that message that I received. Okay. So now what you're going to do is you're going to go in, create those 4 employees. Once that employees are done, it's going to show you the list here, and then you click on these 2 things and you will not get this message. And then you start the chapter from exercise 7.7. So 7.8 actually. That's when you start recording transactions. Okay, and those transactions will be covered in another video that will be posted separately and that will be posted in a 1 day period. So if you will just look at this video and start working on chapter 7, and then by tomorrow you will have another video posted which will be focused on the transactions. Okay, if you don't want to wait for the video, that is okay as well, because the explanation that you have in the textbook is very explanatory, so you can understand what's going on and you can continue. But if you want to wait for the video, let's wait for the video and watch it. Again, I'm not going to do those transactions, but I'll walk you through the process for recording the payroll entries as well. So that is it for this video, and I'll be back with another video that will wrap up the payroll chapter, and which will include the transactions, payroll taxes, and then the various reports that are going to be covered in this chapter. Alright guys, take care till then, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.